Imagine waking up one day and the rulers of your land for over 200 years are just gone. How did that happen? Why did the British leave India in 1947? This is a question that leaves many pondering, a historical enigma wrapped in layers of time. It's not just about the departure, but the circumstances, the players, the intricate dance of politics and power. If you've ever wondered about this historical mystery, then stick around as we unravel the events that led to the British departure from India, a time of growing discontent and nationalist movements in India. As the 20th century dawned, the seeds of departure were already being sown. The Indian National Congress, founded in the late 19th century, was increasingly gaining momentum and support. Its members were advocating for self-governance and independence, rallying the people with fervent speeches and impassioned pleas. The British were no longer seen as benevolent rulers, but as oppressive colonizers, and the desire for freedom began to take root in the hearts of the Indian people. World War II played a significant role as well. The British rule in India was already on shaky ground, and the war further weakened their hold. The British Indian Army was one of the largest volunteer armies in history, with over 2.5 million men. These soldiers fought valiantly on various fronts, defending not just India, but the larger British Empire. However, the war also laid bare the stark contrast between the British and Indian experiences. While Britain emerged victorious, India bore the brunt of the economic fallout. Widespread famine and economic instability further fueled resentment against the British rule. The end of the war brought with it a renewed call for independence. The Indian National Congress, under the leadership of figures like Mahatma Gandhi and Jawaharlal Nehru, championed the cause of freedom with renewed vigor. Their non-violent resistance and civil disobedience movements captured the world's attention, and international pressure on Britain to grant India its independence began to mount. Meanwhile, the British were grappling with their own post-war challenges. The cost of maintaining their overseas empire was weighing heavily on the war-ravaged economy. There was also a growing realization that the tide of history was turning against colonialism, and clinging onto their Indian empire was becoming increasingly untenable. As the winds of change swept across the Indian subcontinent, the British grip on India began to loosen. The stage was set for a historic departure, one that would forever change the course of history for both Britain and India. The seeds of departure had been planted, and they were about to bear fruit. By the mid-1940s, the British had all but lost control over India. But what was the final nail in the coffin? Let's take a closer look. The 1940s were a tumultuous time for India. A series of events were unfolding that would ultimately lead to the British Empire's withdrawal from the subcontinent. One such event was the Indian Naval Mutiny of 1946. This was a significant display of defiance against British rule by Indian sailors in the Royal Indian Navy. The mutiny began in Bombay, now known as Mumbai, and quickly spread to other parts of India. This open rebellion by a key component of the British military infrastructure in India sent shockwaves through the British administration. Simultaneously, the Quit India movement was gaining momentum. Launched by the Indian National Congress in 1942, this movement called for an end to British rule in India. The Quit India movement was a mass protest involving strikes, demonstrations, and acts of civil disobedience all across the country. This widespread resistance further undermined British authority and made it abundantly clear that the Indian population was ready for self-rule. Alongside these internal pressures, Britain was also feeling the heat internationally. The end of the Second World War saw the rise of anti-colonial sentiments worldwide. Nations around the globe began to question the legitimacy of British rule in India. The United Nations, formed in 1945, was a platform where these concerns were voiced, adding to the diplomatic pressure on Britain. So we see a convergence of factors that formed a perfect storm. The Indian Naval Mutiny, the Quit India movement, and the mounting international pressure all played pivotal roles in pushing the British to a tipping point. It was becoming increasingly clear that their hold on India was untenable. With the scales of power tipping in favor of the Indians, the British had no choice but to pack their bags. Their departure marked the end of 200 years of colonial rule and the dawn of a new era for India. And so, on the 15th of August 1947, the British Raj came to an end. But what exactly happened on that fateful day? The day dawned with mixed feelings of excitement, apprehension, and a sense of the unknown. The British had decided to transfer power to two dominions, India and Pakistan, marking the end of 200 years of colonial rule. Lord Louis Mountbatten, the last Viceroy of India, addressed the Constituent Assembly in Delhi, speaking words of goodwill and hope for a prosperous future. As the clock struck midnight, the new national flag of India was hoisted and unfurled, replacing the Union Jack that had flown over the subcontinent for centuries. The moment was marked by the chiming of bells and the booming of guns, saluting the birth of a free nation. Jawaharlal Nehru, the first Prime Minister of India, delivered his famous Tryst with Destiny speech, evoking a sense of pride, hope and determination among his countrymen. Across the length and breadth of the country, people celebrated with jubilation and fanfare. Fireworks lit up the sky and the air was filled with songs of freedom and joy. The British, on the other hand, quietly packed up and left, their departure marked by a sense of relief, tinged with a touch of melancholy. And just like that, the British left India, leaving behind a legacy that continues to shape the nation to this day. The British departure marked a new beginning for India, but what did it mean for the people and the country as a whole? The immediate aftermath of the British departure was a bittersweet moment. The joy of independence was tempered by the pain of partition, as the subcontinent was divided into India and Pakistan. This division triggered one of the largest mass migrations in human history, a tragic saga marked by communal violence and countless lives lost. In the wake of this upheaval, India faced the formidable task of nation building. It had to forge a sense of unity out of diversity, establish democratic institutions, and chart a course towards economic self-sufficiency. The legacy of British rule, meanwhile, left its mark in various ways, from the English language and legal system to the railways and the game of cricket. In the end, the British departure from India was not just a historical event, but a turning point that redefined the destiny of an entire nation.